Hello, everyone, and welcome to Modern Morality, Rites and Wrongs, a Masonic podcast. I'm joined here by Tommy.
Glad to be here.
And Johnny.
Hello.
Thank you for listening, and we hope that you enjoy. Just a disclaimer for the audience. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the host and guest and do not represent any Grand Lodge or subordinate lodge within Freemasonry. This content is for informational and discussion purposes only. Thank you. Well, welcome back to Modern Morality. This is Mikey. It's good to have everybody back. I'm still joined here with Johnny. Johnny?
Yeah, I'm glad to be back too.
And
been a while.
We actually have a new co-host. John is no longer with the Modern Morality thing. He decided to retire officially, but we now have Tommy with us. Tommy?
Good to be with you guys and appreciate the invite or the opportunity, both I suppose it is, to join in.
Yeah, absolutely. We love having you. So,
John may be visiting from time to time.
Oh, absolutely. I'm sure he will.
He's not going completely away.
For those who remember John, he's a man of many hobbies, and he gets bored very easily, so he will probably find his way back here from time to time. This episode is officially either, we haven't figured out exactly how it's going to work. It's either going to be a sub-channel or it's going to be a second season of Modern Morality. But yeah, today's purpose is to talk about why we came back. So I'm not going to speak over too much of it, but this is going to be geared more toward
How long has it been? Been a while.
About a year.
There's been a lot happening this year for me, I can tell you that.
Yeah.
A lot in my personal life and a lot in my fraternity. So we
Yeah.
got a lot of new content to share with people.
Yeah, we in the last season, or starting up in Modern Morality, we really didn't talk about our relationship with Freemasonry. It was more based off of society in general and morality that is within society, where it comes from, and kind of how it's applied currently versus how it was applied in the past, and so on and so forth. But this series specifically is going to fall more along the lines of Masonry. The morals that were taught, the morals that are currently being kind of denied.
How they're applied in
Right.
practicality.
For those who are familiar with Freemasonry, there is a lot of national controversy with different Grand Lodges, and we're here to hopefully shed some light on either some more controversy or possibly speak of it in a positive light. We'll just have to see what happens. But
Bottom line is educate.
Right. So, but yeah, this is more geared toward Masonic education, so to speak, or just kind of giving some insight within Masonry. All three of us here currently are Master Masons, have been for years. Two of us officially are past masters, but that will be a story for another episode, I'm sure.
And two of us have 25 years or more.
Yeah.
Well, there you go.
Yeah. So, but yeah, to start off, I think we really need to go around the table and talk about why this is happening. Why did we decide to, or personally, what did you want to do or bring to the table in regards to modern morality? What do you want to talk about in the future, and where do you see this going if it really starts to take off?
I don't mind starting that one.
Go for it.
When we first started Modern Morality, Mikey and I and John, well, it was a good avenue to get this discussion out there to a broader audience about what's going on in our world and how we can be a part of making it better, what our observations were, how time had changed things, and then the only place prior to that podcast that I found myself really talking about morality was in the lodge.
Right.
I had a lot of lodge brethren, and morality, of course, is a foundation of Masonry, and or should be, I should say. That may be tipping off to some of the discussion that's going to come up, but recently it's hard to talk about and have those real discussions and transparency even within the lodge. So I want to revitalize this, and I want to get out there and reach more brethren and more of the general public. This is not a tiled podcast by any means.
And this has a disclaimer, and this will be a disclaimer for every episode, and I'll make sure to do it in the future. These are our own individual voices. The opinions you hear on here is those of our own. We do not represent the Grand Lodge of Georgia
or any Grand Lodge.
Or any subordinate or Grand Lodge So these are our opinions solely divorced from the Grand Lodge or any Grand Lodge or any subordinate lodge. So just as a disclaimer, we'll make it more
we
official.
welcome feedback. We welcome other opinions. We would even like to have some of you as guests on the show sometime.
Absolutely. And don't think that you have to be a Mason in order to have your opinions, because a lot of this is based off of just the morality of society. Freemasonry was kind of a big foundation in building morality in this country. So being a Mason is not a prerequisite for having a conversation, and nor should it ever have been.
One of the things I've always enjoyed about Masonry is that you could get in the lodge and everybody had equal say. Everybody was, they call it, on the level, and every opinion mattered, and you walked away appreciating each other's differences if that were the case. I'd like to see more of that. Unfortunately, I feel like recent events we're seeing less of that, and I think it's more broad than just where I'm active. I see it in the news all the time with other parts of the fraternity as well as in the world.
Well, let's go.
But anyway, that's what I'd like to see happen in this revised series.
I was gonna say, well, now you guys haven't had the opportunity to speak with Tommy. So he's going to be a new voice, but he's a very well-educated Mason. He's very accomplished as well. So I'm hoping that you guys will enjoy hearing from him as much as Johnny and I have. So Tommy, I guess the question I want to pose for you is, why did you accept the invitation to come and co-host with us? But on top of that is, what do you hope to gain or hope for everyone else to gain with these conversations that the three of us are having?
I appreciate the question. Obviously hanging out with you guys, I suppose, is sort of the short, quick answer to that. But Johnny's answer covers a lot of that ground, and I think that I would actually add to that not only, and both of you made allusion to this, not only is having a ability to speak your mind and exchange ideas in the lodge a foundation of it. It is the origin of it.
Right. Right.
And so if you're not able to do that, then you're basically not even being afforded the purpose for which the fraternity was founded. Now, you can get into arguments about when Masonry was founded now, but if the generally accepted, Grand Lodge of England, I think, early 1700s, that was, where most people are in broad agreement that what we know today as Freemasonry began.
Right.
So that for starters. And I'm going to back up for just a minute and sort of give a little background for everybody on me, just so they have some context from where I'm coming from besides. So I come to this, and basically, and on top of what you already heard from me from interest in joining the podcast, was obviously I've been in lodge based on their earlier comments with Johnny and Mikey. What now is guys, 4 years, close to it, I guess, or if not 4.
You've been back in that long.
Yeah, well, I've been back in with you fellas. I mean, I had attended a little amount in Virginia while I was there. And to sort of spell that out for folks that are listening. So I, in the area from which we're broadcasting, I grew up in this region, which is Northeast Georgia. And then for 25 years, I spent basically a career as depending on how you want to describe it, government affairs representative, lobbyist. In the words of a lot of people,
we'll try not to hold that against you.
Try to be ugly about it. So
yeah, here we are talking about morality. And we're like, hey, government lobbyists.
Right,
yeah,
right. So, but if it makes anybody feel any better, I would say 80 to 90% of the lobbying I did was for the Defense Department. That may make some people feel slightly better about it. Maybe it doesn't. I don't know. But anyway, and that's what I was doing over those years, and attended some lodge in Virginia while I was there, but not to any degree where I was, certainly not an officer, not at all involved in degree work, that sort of thing, but was familiar with it. My father was a Mason. But anyway, came back home here 4 years ago, pretty immediately, just got right back into lodge. I'd remained a member of the lodge, which just so happened that Mikey and Johnny happened to be in when I came back, and of course they were, as as evidenced by my presence here right now, very active in the work of the lodge, and so immediately became familiar with them, and got active, and when it was all said and done, found myself elected to the East, which is, for folks who aren't Masons listening to this podcast, the worshipful master of the lodge this year, 2024. And there's a lot more to that story, which I'm sure that we can get to at a later point.
We'll delve into that a lot deeper in future episodes, I'm sure.
And later on, but just a rough and dirty, sort of thumbnail sketch of my background, bringing me here with you fine fellas. That hopefully that'll suffice.
And since you've been back, I was actually privileged to have the opportunity to help present him with his 25-year apron.
He certainly was, and we were all, and Mike and I were privileged with the opportunity to be present for the presentation of viewers at the last meeting we were all at.
Yeah, that's true. I was actually raised in '91. For another elaboration at some point, we can talk about why. But I took an 8-year hiatus from Masonry, and therefore I just now recently got my 25-year award, which I'm proud of.
As I'm proud of mine, and Mikey will surely be proud of his, and others that have had their own journeys are as well.
I'm gonna jump in and kind of give you my points as to what I hope this turns into. Now, modern morality was built off of the idea that through conversation and debate and hopefully education and we would help society grow. People who listen to our podcast would hopefully be able to take something away from it, learn, and grow themselves, and use the lessons that we were able to come to into their own lives.
Learn from our mistakes.
Yeah, exactly. For me, it's the same purpose, just a different vehicle. So Masonry, for me personally, was one of the best things that's ever happened to me. It was a lot of history and lessons and fellowship with great people, and through those lessons and through those rituals that we are, a part of when going through the lodge, we learn a lot about morality of a Mason. The morality of a Mason is we don't hold ourselves to a moral superiority by any means, but our morals tend to be a lot more, I would say, strict. It's definitely more heartfelt than what a lot of people in society today feel. I
think your morals are whatever they are. I think that level is
the
much stricter.
Taught.
I think that one of the things that I always hoped to get from the fraternity, and often did, was that I had a network of people who called themselves my brothers that would help hold me accountable to those morals.
Right.
And it would help me debate what was moral or immoral in certain unique situations. I don't get as much of that as I used to. Right. I get more opinionated responses, and I get people shying away from things more than they used to.
We'll talk about the causes.
Yeah, we'll elaborate. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, you're good. We'll talk about the causes here in just a second. The point that I wanted to make, though, is the Masonry that I originally started in, and I've only been in Masonry for about 7 years. But in the 7 years that I have been in Masonry, it has changed pretty significantly, or at least my eyes have been open to some of the goings on of Masonry. And we're not talking about any just one subordinate lodge. It's a chain of subordinate lodges, plus possibly the Grand Lodge. One of the biggest controversies right now is the Grand Lodge of Florida releasing a gag order over the state, and then they are now charging several Masons for really general and vague comments that could be geared toward the Grand Lodge, but in reality, they're harmless comments. And the Grand Lodge is kind of retaliatory against these guys. But Masonry isn't what it needs to be. It's not what we're taught it should be. And this podcast, hopefully, is just a shine a light of what it should be and what it is currently. And hopefully with this podcast, we might be able to gain a following, as you know, with people who are dedicated, who love the craft for what it should be, and hopefully we can work together to restore it to its glory.
Yeah, I think I would want to jump in just real quickly to say that, you know, as you two know from obviously having me here, I'm sort of a first principles guy, which gets back to my comment right at the beginning while Johnny was making his introductory comments, that the origin of Masonry is free speech. And even taking it to both, and not quibbling with, but the title of the name of your podcast, and talking about things in terms of morality. Mm-hmm. I sort of associate myself with what Johnny was saying, that, you know, I'm not saying that you are in your comments, or maybe you are, and I don't really care either way, but I'm not going to Masonry for a system of morality. I'm going to what I understand Masonry to be for, which is a system of self-improvement.
Right.
Okay. And that the other people that are other men who are there with me are there for that same purpose, which is to improve themselves. And we can, and this is going to be another big topic for another discussion at some point.
You're right on the money, Tom. It shouldn't be our source of our morality. It should be a vehicle in which we can practice our morality.
Right.
In which we can improve ourselves. I 100% agree.
And in order for it to work, the men, keep coming back to it, it's a fraternity, it's men who are there have to be they should, but according to the principles of the fraternity, they have to be there for that purpose. Right. That is what you oblige yourself to when you are accepted into, and you take the obligation to become a member of the fraternity, is that you are sincerely looking for self-improvement and are going to actively pursue that.
Right.
And I think that is, quite frankly, a big source of a lot of all the things that we are likely to discuss.
Yeah. Now, and to kind of add on to that point, without giving any quote unquote secrets of the ritual work, one of the main questions that is asked over and over and over in multiple degrees, officer installations, is it of your own free will and accord?
Correct.
And that question alone, if you answer no, you wouldn't go any further, because Masonry is built off of people who or it should be built in a way that people who want to self-improve or improve themselves have that system of brethren who will also lend a hand in their improvement.
That's right.
So yeah,
that's also the reason for one of the biggest perceptions that people have of the fraternity, is that they want to be invited, and you can't be invited because it's got to be your own free will and accord.
That's right. Correct.
Now, another discussion we can have one day, and this is something I would love to go deep in, is how Masonic education is not something to be proud of anymore, or people don't take pride in it. Therefore, due to their fear of saying too much because they're uneducated,
right,
the numbers have gone down because people don't know what they can and can't say.
We might ought to reserve a whole episode for Masonic education, because Mikey, you just hit a broad subject there. You can break that down into the history of Masonry as part of education, the tenets of Masonry and how they relate to morals as even its own category. The
principles, yeah.
And then you got what a lot of people confuse to be all of the education of Masonry, and that's just the ritualistic work.
Yep.
The ritualistic work is just a fraction of education in Masonry.
Right. And just the discussion we were just having in terms of, that being going back to my word, the origin, all of that. I'd relayed this to you guys a while back. I just not even, thought of this in these specific terms recently, but the entire reason why you can't be invited and that you have to ask for a petition is because those actions in and of themselves demonstrate a desire for self-improvement.
Right.
Because the fraternity can't want it more than you do.
Right.
I mean, because that's getting the literal cart before the horse. The fraternity doesn't work towards and further the principles that it's been established for if it doesn't uphold them in the way it well, it's actually not attraction, but uh, brings in its members.
You're triggering all kind of thoughts for me there, Tommy.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, like for instance, back in my band days, yes, I was in band as a child or as a teenager, youth, whatever you want to call it. That's been a long time. The
Not
band
that long
director.
for me.
Yeah, I know exactly. But the band director used to actually tell us the whole band was only as good as the worst player.
Right.
And so if you've got some bad actors or people not taking things serious, they're undermining the whole aggregate average of the effectiveness of your fraternity, which could lead to a whole episode actually on guarding the ballot box and
Right, yeah.
and all that kind of stuff. But
One of the things, and I think we can all agree with this, is there is not a for those who are in masonry, and I know especially in the lodges in our area, Masonic education is not near important as fellowship and influence is the best way I can describe it. You have people who come in and they're coming in there not only in the guise of self-improvement, but in reality they're just trying to show good grace with some other person. And we have seen whole lodges built off of this here recently. There's been a lot of controversy, especially surrounding my Masonic journey. And I know Johnny and Tommy also fall into this realm without going too in-depth right now. But it's through those controversies, and we have each really put our noses to Masonic code. We put our noses to the judicial process. We have really tried to learn the ins and outs and the structure of Masonry in general. And there is a huge gap in the Masonic code. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of things that are left up to interpretation.
well, I can tell you as a young Mason, I come into the fraternity, I guess you could say a bit naive, a bit trusting, which I all hoped I could be. And I'll let the elders of the lodge, or the ones more seasoned, I guess you could say, I let them I kind of yielded to them to make sure that those things were being addressed. And now I guess the more I see, the more experience I've gained, I see that a lot of it is really much more interpretive than that, and that what I've been relying on over the years has been certain people or certain groups or certain subcultures interpretation of that. And now I want to learn more of the black and white and where the grayness is, and so that we can either clear that up for folks and for ourselves, or whether we can effectively change things to be what they were intended.
Right. Now, the Masonic code, again, going back to it, there's a lot of things in it that are very vague, which leads to interpretation. Now, the issue is not the interpretation or even that it leads to it, it's the people who take advantage of it. Now, what we have learned here recently is that there are a lot of individuals in this fraternity who may have gotten into it with good intentions, but they now have their own agenda, and that own agenda is pretty much tainting how a whole lodge is run. We've seen instances, and I say there's been instances I've personally seen where certain Masons feel super entitled because of their tenure, how long they've been a Mason, their accolades, what kind of office positions they've held, or just contributions to the lodge, and they feel that those characteristics or factors elevate them above others, and then suddenly, they're a leader without being elected a leader. And it's through those conversations and through those, situations that Masonry can fall to the wayside, and lodges can be run as things other than lodges, just with a symbol slapped on it.
So I feel like it's human nature for people who think they've contributed to be able to be entitled as a result of that. And I don't think that's unique to Masonry. I know it's not unique to Masonry. You see that in churches. You see that in any volunteer organization. You see that even in the workplace.
Mm-hmm. Charities are a big thing about that, too.
I don't fault the individuals for being flawed. We're all flawed. I think that I would fault maybe the fraternity in general, the membership in general, for not holding it in check. It's the people who are not being active and who are not voicing their opinions that are allowing these people to be entitled.
Right.
And so, I don't fault so much the people that we tend to label as the bad guys. I fault the fact that they're allowed to do it. And I think we all are accountable to that.
Well, and I think that goes back to the comment earlier about there's a lot of Masons who are not educated in Masonry or, in general. And their fear is that if they speak out, they're suddenly going to be deemed unmasonic, which is like...
Well, in some cases, they are labeled that way. Sometimes fairly, sometimes not so much.
Right, and being deemed unmasonic is almost the same as anybody being called a Nazi when it comes to Masonry. It's the worst thing you could possibly do.
It is a charged accusation.
Right, and that being said, you have members who are fearful of someone who has that influence and that power within a lodge, who's supposed to be a thought leader, someone who is very open and holds people accountable the correct way, and without a lot of internal bias, but due to their own agendas, they have their own, their actions speak differently.
Well, we've already made a lot of reference to it here in your comments, but I know I can say just broadly for the three of us, we have seen firsthand the entitlement that you're talking about, the sort of assumption of prominence within a lodge because of contributions, particular activities, particular
Positions.
Positions that are a product of those activities, just come right now out and say a particular fundraiser that is led by one particular individual, or and that may differ from lodge to lodge, but then and I know for a fact, not just on our common experience here, but other conversations I've had in this area with other members of other lodges, that's not uncommon.
No.
Oh, it's very common.
Yeah. And the problem there is, it gets back to, this, quite frankly, the simple fact that we're sitting here and having the podcast, this is all about education is what it really gets down to. And where the failure has come is that in these lodges, the real purpose of Masonry has not been taught.
Right.
And it's not been upheld. And, it's not a matter of, let's point fingers about that. And let's assign blame about that. Let's just fix it.
Amen.
Let's just fix it.
Well, and that's, again, part of the reason for this podcast personally is I have told these gentlemen several times in the last several months, I don't mind being the person who holds a mirror as long as I feel that I'm in the right and I'm doing.
Oh, you got to identify problems.
Right.
Yeah. And I know, I'm pretty sure that's not what you're making that comment about in reference to what I was just saying, but it's not about not holding, as Johnny frequently says, conspicuous things that need to be identified, but it's not saying, well, you did that on purpose, or this lodge hasn't cared about the ceremonial work for ever how much long a time, and who's to blame for that, or why did that happen that way. That's kind of more what I'm talking about. That all that stuff really doesn't matter, but in order to solve a problem, you gotta identify it, and it's got to be addressed out in the open.
Right.
Well, and honestly, I think that's what has kind of been an attack here recently is it's either out of fear or manipulation or whatever that looks like. A lot of voices are being kind of squashed.
Yep.
And that open discussion and those open conversations are not happening. And it's a lot of back talk or channels outside of lodge.
I was
going to
say worse than that. It's not that it's not out. It's purposely not out in the open. Mm-hmm. It is purposely being kept to the back channels you're talking about, or side talk, or however you like. And that side talk is a phrase that's used in Masonry a lot. I had not heard it as much before I got back in lodge, but yeah, that's exactly what it amounts to.
One of the things I want to clarify too is that in Masonry, officers can be elected or appointed depending on what the office is. Now, the elected officers are representatives of the body, but that doesn't give them total power. One of the biggest misconceptions with the leadership of any lodge is that because they were elected, they now have decision power over everyone else, and that's not the case.
In reality, once you're elected position, you have a bigger servant attitude to serve than,
Right.
than you
100%.
do as a regular member. Matter of fact, I've heard a lot of people say, that their obligations are so and so, that they're only going to do their obligations. You take additional obligations, and they're actually more for serving than they are for leading
Absolutely.
when you take those roles.
And one of the biggest things is I was going to tie back into is with these back channels, lodges are being run by cliques outside of the lodge. All these back channels are the decision makers of the goings on. In reality, the lodge meetings have become just almost a chore. They have to be done because they said they were going to be done. But in reality, the decisions that are being made way before a lodge meeting, and they just get confirmed at an open
Now,
meeting.
when you say outside you mean people that aren't a member of that lodge, or you just mean the lodge members themselves are doing it outside of meetings?
Or
both.
It could be both, honestly, absolutely. Now, typically in our experience, or my experience, it's typically 2 or 3 brethren who've been doing certain things for a long time, who have that influence over a large swath of the membership. They're the ones who are making the decisions, is whatever benefits them or whatever they feel is right. And then they convince everyone else before a meeting. So when the meeting happens, everyone throws their hands up and vote, and whatever they want happens.
Yeah.
No.
And that, in that characterization is, which I'm not disputing at all, is massively corrosive to a lodge, or frankly any organization that is based on equal participation of the membership, which is again a foundation of Masonry.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
On the level and the rest of the things that were mentioned at the top. I think
You probably saw that in government a lot too, Tommy. Is how it's presented, when it's presented, and who presents it can make all the difference in the world.
Oh yes, sir. That is mother's milk stuff of politics, sure. And I mean, and let's pretend that that there's no politics in lodge. There absolutely is.
Probably more, actually. And the reason I say that
Well,
is
shouldn't be.
there shouldn't be. But and you and I have personally had this conversation for years. We have had it over and over and over. Is that in any business, in any job that's paid, when you have a leader, sometimes those employees, quote unquote, feel like they rely on that boss for a paycheck or whatever. So they tend to do a lot more, or put up with a lot more. Masonry is a volunteer army. The leadership style is completely different because these people can just up and leave whenever, which means the politics behind it have to be elevated. You have to make sure you're pleasing everybody in order to get the influence and power for you to get elected to the next spot.
Well, the trouble with the characterization, to describe it that way again, of what you were describing with the back talking, back channeling, and side discussion, nothing going on outside of lodge. Where that becomes the problem is when those discussions get brought to lodge, or they're not discussions that are brought to lodge. They are decisions made ahead of time that are brought into lodge without the information of the membership, presented as, in whatever form they have ahead of time been decided to be presented, with no discussion, and that plays into what you were just talking about, where you've got a membership that, through lack of education or whatever the case may be, tentativeness, maybe if you haven't been there for a while and don't feel like they have the standing or whatever to contribute or whatever, just taking what amounts to orders from down on high. Time comes for the, as you say, raising their hand and moving on, and that's anathema to Masonry. That's not what Masonry is supposed to be. If you've got a question about something, if you want to discuss it, you are on the level with every other man in the lodge, and you have every right at any point to stand up and say, this is what I think about this, or I have a question about this. How did that happen? What can you tell me about this? And there is, you're absolutely right, Mikey. There's a what has been incredibly disappointing to me over the last year, for sure, the last couple of years since I've been back and active in Masonry in Georgia, is just the near absence of that, and that's incredibly unhealthy, and frankly, a lot of the reason we're having this discussion right now.
Right. No, it's definitely changed. Now, when I was worshipful master, when it was time for discussion on anything, I tried to make it a habit to say, guys, don't let me be the only one who talks, because it's not my decision. And when I was elected to the East in my year, the very first thing I said was, I'm not running this lodge. We're running this lodge.
Well, it was hard to take the floor from you, but I tried a few times.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. So, but no, the whole idea of free speech and open conversation, open debate is really what I think we're trying to get to.
Mm-hmm.
Debate doesn't happen in lodge anymore. In fact, in the 7 years that I've been in Masonry, I think I've only ever seen 2 debates, I would say, where there's actually 2 parties of opposite opinions trying to give everyone else the information they need, or that's available, in order to form an opinion. Now,
I've seen numerous cases where the lodge is obviously split,
sure,
but there's not healthy debate about it.
It's shut down.
Yeah.
Right.
It's either shut down or people choose not to inject themselves and to walk away, and then we complain about our attendance and memberships.
Well, and one of the things, we have another brother who he may join us next time. Hopefully he will. Who's had a lot of stuff going on. But anyways, he said something that actually kind of spoke to me, and I've used it several times. So in Masonry, we have this idea of peace and harmony. That's what we strive for. It's what every lodge should be run with, is peace and harmony. At the end of the night, even if we don't disagree, we shake hands and we go about our way as brethren with no ill feeling. Peace and harmony has become misconstrued. People fear that if they say
the
something,
avoidance of drama is harmony is
right,
what they're defining.
Right,
and
and
100%.
And then
y'all have heard me beat this drum a lot,
right,
which is that has, in its most nefarious form, is used by those who want to exercise the maximum control to be the ultimate goal, peace and harmony at all cost, which is not peace and harmony at all. What that is totalitarianism.
Peace and submission.
That's right, submission.
Right,
exactly.
And the brother I was talking about, his phrase is not peace and harmony, it's peace and quiet.
Peace and quiet.
Right.
There you go. Yeah.
And he said that, and it speaks a lot of truth. People use the idea of peace and harmony as a way to manipulate the others to not share their opinion.
Right.
I think, Tommy, though, one thing I'll add to what you said, and you mentioned authority, that they want the authority is the reason they're doing it. That's part of it. I think the other part of it is some people just can't take criticism. And if your opinion varies from them, they get very defensive, and that's not Masonic at all.
No, and that goes back to Masonic education. And again, I'm sure we'll have another episode on it. When it comes to Masonic education, the idea of you coming into a lodge wanting self-improvement means that there's going to have to be constructive criticism. The only people who can give you that constructive criticism is other brethren.
Well, anybody could, but you expect it from your brother.
Right. They're the ones who you are actively...
That's what you're there for.
Right. Actively,
That's right.
actively seeking, and it's their wisdom and their experience to help you through your life to become better.
Exactly.
And what happens is, and we mentioned it earlier with the entitlement, is you have people who come in who may have originally wanted that, suddenly started getting influenced because of their contribution. People start relying on them or whatever, and then they build that influence and power to the point where they're relying on it. Mm-hmm. And then as soon as you try to hold the mirror up, or hold them accountable for anything that's not necessarily to Masonic principles, they do get defensive because their power is being challenged, or the fact that they think that they have contributed so much that they can do no wrong.
Mm-hmm. So
it's a very complicated and messy issue. But overall, I think the idea behind this podcast, especially with the introduction, is why we're wanting to do it. Well, guys, I think you can hear in the conversation that there's been a lot of personal stuff going on with Masonry, but overall, with with the states and the Grand Lodges of several states, that Masonry is being used as a mean for, I don't want to use the word totalitarianism, but essentially is what it is. It is people are trying to earn power.
Well, let's use some future episodes to try to define what it is, because I'm not sure that's exactly what it is, but it sure has the appearance of that.
Strong elements of it,
yeah,
for sure.
Right. Now, I think before we conclude, we have a lot more we could talk about, but I do want to ask really quickly, where was Masonry when you guys came in? And then how is it different than what it is now, as brief as you can?
Well, so that's hard to answer, because there's where I thought it was when I came in, uneducated.
Well, how about this? What about in hindsight? Looking back, is it really that much different after 25 or however many years since 91?
I think it's cyclical. I think that, and I've been a member of multiple lodges now, and I've seen each one of them have good times and bad times. I've seen them where their membership was booming. I've seen them where there was plenty of harmony. I've seen them when there was hard to get anybody to attend a meeting. I've seen, and here's the thing I believe happens in those cycles. I think you have cycles of people who just it's not their priority anymore, and they don't want the drama, they don't want the toxicity, so they pick other things in their life to focus on than their lodge. I think those people are not speaking their mind enough to keep things in check, and I think that. I think that's what happens on the downside. On the upswing, you have a lot of people come in there. They're very vocal. They speak their opinion. You have healthy debate. And lo and behold, you end up seeing all the rewards of that come out in the effectiveness of that lodge and its community. Right. And I think that to ask me if it's before or now, I think I'll see it again. I think it's going to be cyclical no matter where I'm a member. I don't think the lodge I'm a member of makes that big a difference. We can talk about how there are different subcultures at every lodge. But I think just in general, we're talking about human nature and human behavior, and we're going to get back to what originally modern morality was all about, is how it's applied in the real world, not just fraternity. Fraternity is just a good common thing for all of us Masons to use to hang on these discussions. But no, I think this has been a good first episode. I think that we have definitely shown the broadness of what we can cover here. I think we've got to get more focused on future episodes.
Oh, most definitely.
And tell me from a technical standpoint, are we set up now where our audience can give us their comments, give us their feedback? Their opinions are just as valuable as ours, even if they don't agree with us.
Right.
Especially if they don't agree with us. I'd like to hear some of that. I'd like to hear some suggestions for future episodes.
Right.
I'd like to hear volunteers that would like to come on and share their thoughts and opinions.
Good old reality checks.
Good, yeah. There you go.
Well, Tommy, I'm going to throw the same question to you. I originally asked what was Masonry like when you first started versus what it is now, but I think I'm going to ask the same question or clarifying question with Johnny. In hindsight, was it the same then as it is now, or was there differences?
Well, that's real good, because that's how I was going to answer it. And I'm even going to tweak that a little bit because, to be perfectly honest, my frame of reference on Masonry before I ever got in, obviously, was, you guys heard me talk about it, was through my dad.
Right.
I mean, without beating that overly, my father loved Masonry. He spent the very early years, not too far off from your age right now, aspiring to get in, and then when he was successful, I mean, he became very dedicated to it. And and me not being a Mason myself, being obviously I couldn't be. I was a child, a teenager, whatever. You see that, and it's not like Dad was running around the house, talking about Masonry every 15 minutes. He wasn't doing that at all. He didn't do it at all. But you could tell, though, just in the things around the house, Masonic Bibles, the Masonic manuals, the different his lodge certificates on the wall, all those different sorts of things, that this was important to him. And of course it couldn't help but come through why it was. And
Well, ultimately, we want to be seen for the improvements we made through masonry, and it should reflect in our lives. And I'm sure you saw that with your dad.
100%. And which gets back to the whole, self improvement theme. I didn't mean to say, well, I guess maybe I was hammering it, but for however you again like to characterize that. But in the limited amount that I participated in masonry after I came into the fraternity, because when I came in, unfortunately, I was already in Northern Virginia, Washington, when I came into the fraternity, and probably should have been a lot more active than I was there in Virginia through all those years that I was, but I wasn't. That's on me. And then came home and have now been very active for the last 4 or 5 years. I can't help but say, well, a lot of what I've seen is very disappointing as opposed to the ideal that I had seen in what I believe my dad's conception of and feeling about masonry. I think what he loved is certainly there. I know that it is because I'm more educated now by leaps and bounds. And for those who, I guess my dad passed 11 years ago, so he's no longer with us. So that's why I speak a little nostalgically about this too. But just trying to be just very matter of fact and as unemotional as I can about it. Being much more educated about it, obviously, than I was during the time that I was alive and a Mason, and with him, and the periods that I attended with him, and so on and so forth. I unfortunately feel like that if for lack of a better way of putting it, and this is obviously colored by my own background, that the politics of our time, to a large degree, have come to pervade masonry. And maybe that's an episode right there too. And I think that would be the sort of most kind of one-line summary that I could give you an answer to that question. And I probably, based on whatever else you've got left to say, is a good way to bring us to an end here.
Well, I want to add a little bit after hearing y'all's responses there. I mentioned cyclical, and I do believe everything's cyclical. But I'm also hearing a common thread here from all of us that education keeps coming up, and so does experience. Mm. And, when we first joined, we yielded to others we thought had more of that.
Right.
And, if there's one trend, though, that I see that's not necessarily cyclical, that is truly becoming a trend, it has to do with the declining of the fraternity and membership and attendance. And the result of that being that a lot of our newer officers don't have that experience.
Yeah.
I'm seeing numerous lodges who their top officers have only been in the lodge a year or two. Right. And that can't be healthy. I'm sure we could elaborate in some episode on how we could address that, but
right.
I've got a few ideas on it by using, actually relying and pulling in people with experience to help with that. But
I know we're trying to wrap up, but I'm sure one of those is quality over quantity.
Yes.
And it's hard to make that argument, particularly with the higher levels of leadership in the lodge, when right. you hear the phrase dying fraternity so much.
Right.
But part of the reason that is contributing to back up, that's way too convoluted. At least a reason for that situation are, I would argue, some of the measures that have been taken in the name of membership that are accelerating the problem.
Well, I'll give you my brief on it. For me, I started in 2018. I don't think it's changed at all. I think it has been just as political as it has been since I started. The only difference was I was too naive to see it, and it wasn't until I left one lodge due to controversy, joined another one, and because I was naive, I trusted everybody as we're taught we should. That's where we should do. What we should do is trust our brethren. And it took me a while, and it took my morals being tested for me to see where certain key players were and what their agendas were. Same thing, controversy at that lodge, went somewhere different. Seeing that I couldn't effectively change things, I went to a different lodge. And kind of the same thing, the morals here being tested. And at this point in my Masonic career, I've had the opportunity to not only lead the lodge, but I've had the opportunity to defend brethren who are wrongly accused of things. I have seen, or I have myself studied extremely hard when it comes to the Masonic Code to ensure that the lodge is running effectively. Now, in hindsight, if I had all the knowledge I had when I came in, my first lodge probably would have ended up differently, because I would have been more outspoken. Same thing with my previous lodge, or the lodge after that, the one that I'm not currently a part of, but the one before. But now I've gotten to this point where I am extremely passionate about what Masonry is supposed to be. And with the knowledge that I currently have, I think that there is an opportunity to affect change. But there's a lot of things that we have to address that are political, that is going to be our next challenge. So I think that's going to be the last point for me today. All in all, I think, guys, you can hear that there's passion. We all love the fraternity. We just don't agree with every action that some of these Masons have done.
I love the tenets of Freemasonry. I love what it stands for.
The ritual's gorgeous.
Right now, I'm a little bit frustrated with the effectiveness of it.
Well, and again, it's politics. It's about who can influence who and what power you can gain. And that's definitely, and that's not speaking to all lodges. I know that there are lodges out there who...
Oh, no, we're speaking in generalities.
Yeah. And there are some lodges out there who are as wholesome as they can be with a group of great men. But there are Masons out there who are using this fraternity as a vehicle to satisfy their own needs, and that's not what it should be. But
well, on one hand, I would like to say that I love visiting those lodges you're talking about that have it all in order. But I'll just, just a little bit of caution I'll give you there is, until you join that lodge and find out how it's operated, you might find that you're only seeing the surface.
That's exactly right.
One thing that I would also like to do in every episode is have a charge for the audience. Johnny, you kind of already addressed it as far as like reaching out, contacting us. We can read comments and concerns and disagreements and agreements and all that.
And we do.
And we will, yeah. And we'll read them in the podcast so that we can discuss it openly. I think my charge to you guys is never rely on one person to tell you what's right and wrong in the lodge. Educate yourselves. The Masonic Code is something that you can easily have access to.
Yep.
And educating yourself is never going to hurt you. It's only going to equip you with what you need to stand up for what you feel is right.
Educate yourself, form your own opinion, and don't hesitate to share it.
Right. So, Tommy, you got anything you want to charge them with?
I would just reiterate that last comment and bring it to one of the last comments you made about, folks not always agreeing, and people are always not going to agree. But again, that's, uniform agreement is not the purpose. As a matter of fact, it's absolutely...
The measure of health is how we handle those disagreements.
100%.
Not the number of disagreements.
There you go. So, yeah, that's my last word.
Awesome. Well, guys, thank you so much for listening to Modern Morality. I'm assuming we're probably going to find a witty name to tie the Masonry into it. But yeah, until next time, thanks. Thank you for listening to Modern Morality. Please visit our website at modernmoralitymedia.com and leave us some feedback about the show. We look forward to exploring more with you. Until next time.